Hello, I'm Ryan McLean, the Terrestrial Invasive Species Project Manager with the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference under the Lower Hudson Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management contract, and I'm here to talk to you today about vegetation management. So in terms of disposal, if you have a lot of vegetation, a lot of large vegetation that you don't want to bag and carry out with you, you're going to want to find a spot within the infested area that you can make a pile. Ideally, you're going to find a large flat rock that has a lot of sun exposure so that neither the branches nor the roots are in contact with soil, and it gets baked by the sun and it dies easily. So you could make a pile here, for instance. If you don't have a large flat rock in the area, you could make a pile on the soil, but you're going to want to monitor that pile to make sure that nothing re-roots and starts to grow again. Or if you're not too concerned about the aesthetics, you could also hang the plant in a tree as a warning to all the other invasives in the area. So here we have garlic mustard. This invasive is herbaceous, and you'll see this tall one here. This plant is a biennial, so the flowers will eventually produce fruits. So we'll prioritize these over the basal rosettes, the short leaves that don't flower when I'm doing management. This is really easy to pull. So what you're going to want to do is get as close to the ground as possible, firmly grasp that plant, and gently lift it out of the ground. Easy as that. So here we have invasive wineberry, and this is in the raspberry family, so it does have thorns. I'm gonna wear my leather gloves. If you have these thin gloves on as well, you could double glove for extra protection. This is a fairly easy shrub to pull, and it's young, so it's going to be even easier. You can see that it is multi-stemmed, 1, 2, 3 stems on the same plant. So you're going to want to gather those stems up. Again, grab the plant as close as you can to the base and pull with gentle, increasing pressure. If it gives you a little trouble, you can pulse, or you could wiggle the plant around a little bit. And you've got the roots. So here we have a large invasive barberry. And this is a thorny plant. It's got some fairly needle-like and brittle thorns. So I have my leather gloves on, and there's a couple of ways that you might go about managing this to make your life a little easier. The first thing that you could do is get in there, get your hands at the base of the plant, and run your hands up to break off as many of those thorns as you can. Take your pair of loppers and lop off some of those outside branches so you can access the inside of the plant a whole lot easier, where that root mass is underneath the center of the plant. So you can see that I left quite a bit of branch here when I cut. That's because I plan on either pulling or digging this plant out, and it's nice to have a handle. So after you get those branches out of there, and it's easy to get in with your pick mattock or your shovel, you want to dig around and pop that sucker right out of the ground. So here we have an invasive bittersweet vine. This one is pretty young and it doesn't really have anything to climb up here, but it has a fairly shallow but horizontal root growth pattern. So what I'm going to do is first try to pull on the plant and loosen that soil a little bit. I also have with me my mini pick to help loosen the soil to get as much of that horizontal runner as I can. And as I'm pulling, I'm moving my hand down the root to get as close to the soil as possible It's kind of like in those old movies when somebody's wiretapped a house and they're pulling that wire and following it. You can see a long horizontal root on this fairly small plant. So here we have an invasive bittersweet vine that's growing up and choking these trees. This is a hefty old vine. There's no way I could get loppers or pruners around it, and I'm not going to be able to dig this root system out. So for a large vine like this, what we're going to do is cut it as high as we can and as low as we can. That'll at least kill the above ground vegetation that's choking these trees. Once you cut the vegetation, you're not going to want to try and pull this vine down because you could dislodge any broken or dead branches up there, and that would be very dangerous and hazardous. So we got through that top part, and now I'm going to cut the other end as low as I can to the ground. And by using gentle strokes, using the entire length of my saw, cut through this bad boy in a couple of minutes. So we have a larger shrub here that I know I'm not going to be able to pull out. I could dig it out, but if I didn't have any digging tools, I could use a method called cut only. It's important to remember not to do this on aggressive resprouters. Cut only is really great as a band-aid, a temporary solution to prevent a large shrub or tree like this from going to fruit. It almost definitely will resprout from that stem that you cut, so frequent cutting is definitely going to be required for this method. So what you're going to want to do is take loppers, pruners, or a handsaw and get pretty close to the base of the plant and make a cut. Make sure you cut all of the branches on that plant, and you'll want to leave some stump so that you can come back and cut it again in the future. If you did have a digging tool, this would also be a great way to kind of clear away a lot of that vegetation that might be in your way so that you can access the root system easier. So you could get in there with a pick, mattock, or a shovel and try and get those roots out of the ground after that. So here we have a larger woody shrub, burning bush, and it doesn't look that large, but it snapped off here, so it used to be a lot bigger, and that root system is going to be pretty hefty. You can see that I won't be able to pull it by myself. Yeah, that's stuck in there. So, my tool of choice is going to be the pick mattock. I'm going to first clear out the leaves around the shrub so that I have a better view of the base of the plant. And now that I know where it's rooted, I can start digging and loosening the soil around those roots. And I'm going to try and go all the way around the plant if I can, because those roots will be spread out in a horizontal fashion. Now that I've loosened the soil around the edges of that plant, I'm going to want to try and get this pointy end underneath the root mass. There are multiple stems here, so I'm going to try and aim for the center of those stems to get as much of the root mass as possible. Might take a few tries as you prospect for where those roots are and if there are any rocks nearby. But once you get a good footing underneath it, come over to the other side and start to pry that plant up. Once you've got it mostly loosened like that, you can try to start to pull on it a little bit more. And in just a few minutes, you got all that out of the ground. This one is a little bit bigger. Can't really pull it on my own. So, Christy, would you mind giving me a hand? Some teamwork on a two-person pull?
Sure thing.
Alright, I'm gonna grab as low as I can. You're gonna want to put your hands right above mine. I'm gonna count down from 3, and on 1, we'll pull with some even increasing pressure. 3, 2, 1. That's the power of teamwork. So earlier I used a pick mattock to get out most of this burning bush here, this large shrub, but I wasn't able to get this part out. So I could keep digging and I could keep pulling, but I also have a weed wrench with me. So I'm gonna let this do all the hard work. I'm gonna put the weed wrench flat next to the plant, open up that clamp, and get the clamp around the base of the stem there. Pull back as much as I can while I have my foot here to get that clamped, and then get that right out of the ground. Before leaving your work site, make sure you clean all of your tools and equipment, your shoes, and your clothes of all dirt and seeds so you don't transfer any invasives. And if you do take any data on what species you managed, how many, and how large the infestation was, please do report that to IMAP Invasives. Invasives management helps keep our natural areas beautiful and healthy, so thank you for doing your part to manage invasives.